Deep in the world's most unexplored caves, researchers found structures that don't behave like rock and don't behave like anything we understand. Picture being wedged in a space so tight you can't turn around, you can't move forward, and no one can reach you. Every breath feels smaller than the last, like the air itself is being taken from you. You're deep beneath the crust of the earth, where the silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. Above you, miles of stone. Below you, nothing but darkness. The kind of darkness where the idea of light doesn't even feel real anymore. But in places like this, it's not the silence that unsettles people. It's what breaks it. Welcome back to Mr. Wick and Whispers. Recently, explorers in the world's deepest, most isolated cave systems have begun finding things. Not formations shaped by time, not mineral deposits, but structures that feel wrong. Biogenic formations, organic, pulsing, and rhythmic. They suggest that something has been breathing in the dark long before humans ever walked the surface. Today, we are descending into the heart of a discovery that defies every law of biology we know. We are exploring true cave disasters tied to these discoveries, incidents that trigger the fight or flight response. Stay until the end, because the final piece of evidence we uncovered doesn't just suggest life. It suggests an intelligence that has been watching us from the shadows for millennia. The living labyrinth of the Krubera Abyss. The stone doesn't just hold you. Sometimes it tastes you. Imagine, if you will, that you are me. I am 2,000 meters below the surface of the Earth in the Krubera system. The air here is thin, tasting of wet limestone and ancient dust. To get here, I've spent the last 6 hours squeezing my body through squeezes, gaps in the rock so narrow I had to exhale all the air from my lungs just to slide my rib cage through. It is the definition of a true cave disaster waiting to happen. One wrong move, one panicked breath, and you are a permanent part of the geology. I reached the chamber that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't on the maps. The walls weren't the usual jagged gray. They were covered in a substance that looked like calcified velvet. As I moved my light across the ceiling, I saw them. The veins. These aren't mineral deposits. These are complex, branch-like networks that bleed a clear, viscous fluid when touched. But here is where the unexplained cave disasters of the past start to make sense. As I sat there, trying to steady my heart rate, I realized the cavern was rhythmic. There was a low-frequency hum, a vibration that I felt in my teeth rather than heard in my ears. It sounded like a lung, a massive, stony lung, drawing in the cold subterranean air and pushing it back out through the pores of the rock. The Appalachian Range is old, so old that the mountains have begun to fold back into the earth. But this felt older. As I moved further into these veins, the limestone transitioned from cold, indifferent stone to something that felt supple. When my shoulder brushed against the wall, it didn't scrape. It gave way, like pressing your thumb into the side of a ripened fruit. I came upon a vertical shaft, a throat, that dropped into a void my headlamp couldn't pierce. The air coming up from that hole didn't smell like stagnant water. It smelled like copper and ozone. It smelled like a living lungs exchange. I began the descent, chimneying my way down, my back pressed against one side and my feet against the other. Halfway down, the walls began to constrict. This wasn't a geological shift. It was a peristaltic motion. The rock was squeezing inward, then releasing in a slow, agonizing cycle. I had to time my movements with the breath of the cave. Inhale, the walls tighten. I freeze. Exhale, the walls relax. I slide down 3 feet. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribs, but the cave's pulse was slow, deliberate. It was forcing me to adopt its tempo. If I panicked and breathed out of sync, I would be crushed by the literal ribs of the mountain. I finally dropped into a chamber that shouldn't exist miles down. The floor was covered in a thick, translucent gel that muffled every movement. And in the center of the room sat a structure that looked like a massive, calcified heart. It was a junction of veins, hundreds of them, all pumping that clear, viscous fluid into the ceiling. As I approached, my light caught something metallic embedded in the organic mass. I scraped away the grime. It was a carabiner, old, rusted, but etched into the side were the initials of a diver who had gone missing in these systems back in the 90s. He hadn't drowned. He hadn't been lost. He had been harvested. The biogenic structures weren't just growing around him. They were weaving his remains into the architecture of the abyss. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't in a cave. I was inside a nervous system. Every step I took on that gelatinous floor was a signal being sent back to a central intelligence. I noticed the veins on the ceiling were beginning to glow with a faint, bioluminescent pulse. They were communicating. I remember the sensation of the match. Every time I took a breath, the chamber would echo it a split second later. If I shifted my weight, the gel beneath me shifted in kind. It was imitating me. It was learning the mechanical frequency of a human body. This is the hidden truth behind so many horror cave stories. The Earth isn't just a passive tomb. It is an active predator that mimics its prey to keep them calm while it closes the exit. I looked back at the chimney I had descended, and my blood ran cold. The opening was gone. The supple stone had knit itself shut, leaving only a seamless, pulsating wall of calcified velvet. I was no longer a researcher. I was a nutrient. I began to dig. I used my rock hammer to tear at the soft walls, and the cave screamed. It wasn't a sound heard with ears, but a psychic vibration that rattled my skull. A thick, dark ichor sprayed from the wound I made, and the smell of rot became overwhelming. The veins above me began to lash out like slow-motion whips, sensing the heat of my body. In the darkness, I heard a voice. "I'm stuck. Help me." It was my own voice. Perfect. The exact pitch of my panic. The walls weren't just watching. They were acoustic mirrors, feeding my own terror back to me to keep me paralyzed. I found a secondary vent, a small, jagged hole near the floor. I dived into it, head first, dragging my body through a slurry of mud and that clear fluid. I felt things brushing against my ankles, filaments, thin as hair but strong as wire, trying to hook into my boots. I crawled for what felt like hours, my fingers bleeding as I clawed at the rock. The walls were whispering now, not words, but the sound of words, the cadence of human speech without the meaning. It was using the voice of the missing diver, a distorted, rhythmic gurgle that echoed through the pipes of the stone. Stay. It's warm. Stay. I finally burst through a thin crust of limestone and tumbled into a familiar mapped passage. I didn't stop. I climbed, I squeezed, and I ran until I saw the gray light of the morning. But as I sat at the mouth of the cave, gasping for the thin surface air, I looked down at my hands. The clear fluid hadn't washed off. It had absorbed into my skin, and as I watched, my own veins began to pulse with a faint, bioluminescent glow, perfectly in sync with the deep, rhythmic thrumming still vibrating beneath my feet. There is something about the deep places of the earth that we aren't meant to understand. Places where the stone is alive, where the walls learn your name, and where your own heart can be hijacked by a rhythm that started billions of years ago. These unexplained cave disasters remind us that we are guests on the surface, but the basement belongs to something else. When we finally analyzed the samples, the small amount of velvet I managed to scrape into a vial, the results didn't come back as fungus or bacteria. The cellular structure was closer to human neural tissue. The cave wasn't just breathing, it was thinking. And there's one thing that's even scarier than that story: not watching another video like this one. Because in the next one, we're venturing into the zone of silence, where the sky mimics the same predatory gaze we found in the caves tonight. If you felt that lung constriction or the hot pool on your neck during this story, let us know in the comments which part shocked you the most. Was it the pulsing heart of the cave, or the voice mimicking the explorer? Make sure to like and subscribe to Mr. Wick and Whispers to stay within the safety of the light. Sleep well, if you can.